Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Amy plays a Word of Seizing against Nick's Elixir of Immortality, and then activates it. At the time when this happens, Amy has no cards in her graveyard, and Nick controls a Psychogenic Probe. Which player or players lose 2 life in this transaction? Okay, so if we take a look at the instructions on the Elixir of Immortality, we'll see that Amy is going to be instructed to shuffle her graveyard and Elixir of Immortality into their owner's libraries. We'll start with Amy first. Now, the instruction to shuffle your graveyard into your library just means to take all of the cards in your graveyard and shuffle them into your library. Now, at first, because Amy has no cards in her graveyard, it's not exactly clear whether she would have to shuffle her library in this case. However, we can see that with this rule here, an instruction that says to shuffle a set of cards into your library is still going to cause you to shuffle your library, even if there are no cards in the set of cards that you're instructed to shuffle in. So that would obviously be a case of Amy shuffling her library, which means that Psychogenic Probe will trigger off of that and deal 2 damage to Amy. Now let's take a look at the second half of that instruction, where Amy is going to be instructed to shuffle the Elixir of Immortality into Nick's library. And yeah, you did hear that right. Amy is actually going to be the one who does that shuffle. And the reason for that is because Amy is the person who controls the Elixir of Immortality's ability. And so that means that she is going to be the person who follows the instructions of that ability, including the one that says to shuffle Nick's card into Nick's library. Now, that's kind of trippy, and it's not the way that things usually work out, but it certainly is the case here. If you look very closely at the triggered ability on Psychogenic Probe, you can see that it only is going to trigger in cases where a player is going to shuffle their own library. Because that is not happening for Nick, Nick is not going to suffer 2 damage as a result of a Psychogenic Probe trigger. So that's the final answer to our question. Amy will take 2, but Nick will not. Now, I did grade this as a 4-starred question. And I'm sure that there's probably some people out there thinking that it was way too simple to count for a 4-star. And so I feel a little bit of a need for me to justify myself. While it is true that the difficulty level of this question did not require you to, for example, be familiar with an extremely obscure rule or be intimately familiar with a complicated process, it definitely is the sort of question that I could see people missing. In fact, I would say that the trick for this question is really subtle, and I could see pretty much any judge in the entire program missing this question just because they didn't see and catch on to the trick. Be very honest with yourself. Did you take the time to very closely read what Psychogenic Probe's trigger condition actually was and notice that it only triggered off of a player shuffling their own library? Or did you take a moment to very carefully read the Elixir of Immortality and make a note of which player was specifically doing the shuffling? If you didn't take a moment to do both of these steps, then even if you got the answer right, that really comes down more to a matter of luck rather than you actually getting the answer right. Now, again, this is a really subtle point, and so I could definitely see a lot of people making this sort of a mistake, but it is a mistake nonetheless. I could have actually even made this question a little bit harder if I wanted to use the originally printed wording on Elixir of Immortality, which makes it a little bit less clear which player is actually the one who's physically doing the shuffling. As it turns out, we actually have this rule here, which says that if Nick's card is going to be going to Amy's library, then it actually goes to Nick's library instead. So that means that even if this templating was the one that Wizards had stuck with for this card, then it still would have absolutely no bearing on the answer to this question. Everything would work out exactly the same way. I have a feeling that the only reason that this was changed was to make it a little bit more clear how this card worked in cases like this for people who didn't happen to know the rule that I put up on screen just now. So that's the answer to this question. I hope everybody can agree that even though this one doesn't have the degree of complexity that a lot of the other 4-star rulings that I've covered have, it still does have a degree of difficulty that certainly needs to be respected. In fact, I sort of like these ones that have a subtle point, maybe even more than the ones that have 85 continuous effects all vying to see which one will win. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.